Good morning, everybody. There are many great buildings in Washington, D.C. The White House, the Capitol, the Lincoln Memorial, etc. And one of the most impressive is the National Cathedral in the northwest corner of the district. And it was on this date in 1907, on September 29, that its cornerstone was laid by President Teddy Roosevelt. Here's a map of what Washington, D.C. was going to look like when it was drawn in the 1790s, and it included a place for a national church. But that never happened the way it was planned, and what we have today is in a different location. And it includes some of these classic characteristics of Gothic architecture. Gothic architecture was big in Europe from the 12th to the 16th century. And that's part of the fun of visiting the church, is how medieval it is. So here's our event. September 29, 1907, President Teddy Roosevelt, along with the Bishop of London, laid the cornerstone. And it was on the same date, 83 years later, that President George Herbert Walker Bush put the last element in place. So 83 years. So here's a photograph of it being built. The cornerstone actually came from near Bethlehem, and then it was put in American granite. Here's another photograph. And the reason it took so long to build is they tried to use traditional methods like they did in Europe, where it would take hundreds of years to build a church. So here it is on Mount St. Alban, which is the highest point in the district. It's the second largest church in our country after St. John the Divine in New York City. And it has flying buttresses, which is typical of Gothic cathedrals. But what does a flying buttress do? Well, because of glass, there was so much glass in these walls that if there wasn't something outside holding them up, the wall will collapse. So that's what a flying buttress does. This is the Bethlehem Chapel. It's the first chapel in the church. It was completed in 1912, and it's been used daily ever since. So ever since the World War I era. This is called the War Memorial Chapel, and that quilt on the left has seals of all the states and also symbols of the various branches of the armed forces. This is the carillon, 53 bells arranged on this metal structure, and then above it is another set of 10 bells. So lots of bells in this church. This is the main rose window. Its theme is creation, let there be light. It has over 10,000 pieces of glass. Another famous stained glass window is this one with some moon rock in it. And if you look carefully, you can see there's a connection between the earth and the moon. That's actual moon rock. This is the Canterbury Pulpit, very elaborate like you'd see in Europe. And this was where Martin Luther King gave his last Sunday sermon of his life from this pulpit. Here's Abraham Lincoln in the Lincoln Bay, and the idea is he's leaving Springfield to go to Washington to become president, and the words you see behind are part of his speech to people in Springfield before he left. So the gargoyles are pretty interesting. They're not all kind of generic monsters, but this one is an American rattlesnake. And this one is the head of Darth Vader. This was put there in 1986. It's on the north side of the church because that is, after all, the dark side. And when the church was built, there was some old-growth forest in the area, and that old-growth forest is still there, and you can see it if you go visit. There's only one president buried in the district. It's Woodrow Wilson, and here's his tomb in the National Cathedral. So even though presidents aren't buried there, they do lay in state in the National Cathedral. So this is President Eisenhower's coffin lying in state in 1969. Other presidents who've lain in state are Ronald Reagan, Gerald Ford, and of course George Herbert Walker Bush. Behind this plaque are the bodies of Helen Keller and her teacher Anne Sullivan, and notice how worn the braille is. All the people over the years paying honor to these gals. So when you go visit Washington, D.C., hit all the normal highlights, but go to the upper left of this map where the National Cathedral is worth a visit.